Welcome to A Rare Reality, a podcast powered by Jordan's Guardian Angels. I'm Christina Janes, Director of Outreach and Content Development for JGA, and I am joined today by two very special ladies. First, our Executive Director, Carol Backos, is here with us today, and our special guest of the day, Ryska, who is a life coach and host of the Special Needs Mom podcast. And Kara, the last time we had you on, you just really resonated with our community, and we were so grateful for that conversation, and we're thrilled to have you back on again.
Gosh, I remember last time your introduction was so honoring. I was like, wow, I feel so good. And now you've done it again. So thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Good. Well, we mean it, because really it was so special. I had so many of the moms reach out and say, I needed that. I didn't even know I needed it, but I did.
Funny story. I'm just going to confess to this. I record my episodes in advance, as I'm sure you do as well. And so oftentimes I'll go back to listen to them because I can't entirely remember what they said. And usually for the guest episodes. And I'm like, that was so good. Like yesterday, I listened to the episode with Anna Brown, and I was like, that was so good. I loved hearing what she had to say. So yeah. I'm glad to hear that it resonated.
Oh, 100%. Carol, I know you and I were very excited. So
oh yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm glad for the opportunity to talk again. I always enjoy your podcast, and they really resonate, and I'm happy to be bringing that message to our community.
Yeah, no question about it. So when we kicked off this year, we had our team at JGA had a conversation about how do we bring the most important topics that we think that have been brought to our attention by our community. How do we bridge that gap to bring them some information? So we created these themes for each and every month. This month happens to be self-care month. And you seem like the perfect person to have that conversation with, because, it's such a topic and that so many people say, I need to take better care of myself, but I don't have the time, I don't have the energy. And so we just move on. Right. Mm-hmm. But I guess to get into it, self-care is a broad topic. So what is it, and why is it so important, and why is it okay? Those are really the things that we need to drill down on.
I think that's actually a really good point of clarification, because I actually think that self-care can mean so many different things to so many different people. And I think this is also one of the reasons it's got a bad rap these days. I don't know if y'all see this as well. I'm sure you do on social media. It's like, especially I'm seeing it more and more with emerging in the special needs mom community or the disability community. And there's this kind of resistance when we hear stuff like, oh, you should do self-care. It's like, don't tell me that. Like, that's actually feels like it's unhelpful to be told that. And so it's almost like there's this resistance, like almost like we're all in this together, like we don't have time for self-care. So I want to kind of call that out and say, just because I think that while I would agree that we don't have hours and hours on our hands, that the reason we as moms are not self-caring for ourselves is not time. Now, I'm not saying time's not a factor, but it's not time. So when I look at self-care, I'm really looking at, like I said, it's being cared for. I actually recorded an episode way back early on my podcast. Go back to the archives. It's called, I hope people thought it was funny. I thought it was funny. It's called Self-Cared. Because, again, it means so many different things to people. I think immediately you hear, oh, bubble bath and pedicure, and those things are great. But I would say I don't necessarily have those on my list of self-care. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They're nice, but they're more of like, oh, this feels good in the moment. But like, I got to go right back out to my life, and, all the things are going to still be happening. So I think self-care is a relationship with yourself. I think we could also change the word out for like self-care to self-love, and actually have that be something that kind of changes our lens to what we're actually trying to do. Because again, self-cared, how do you care for your children? I think this lens, is helpful for us moms, because us moms, we go to all the lengths. We don't stop. We stay up all night. We do all the things for our children. And yes, sometimes we might feel resentful, but we keep showing up. We don't have excuses. And so that's a level, that's a capacity that I know we all have in us to care for ourselves. And so I'm thinking, okay, let's turn that relationship of how you care for other people, let's turn that towards yourself. And yes, it will require us to change some of our paradigms because, especially women, I think there's a real misconception of what it looks like, or like there's a, it's like everyone says, oh, yes, we should care for ourselves. But like if you go to a party and show up like super well cared for, like, oh my gosh, I'm so rested. I feel so ready for the day. I feel energized, man. Um, and you share that at a party, people are going to look at you like, you're not invited here anymore. Like, no, thanks. We don't want your positivity.
Yeah.
We don't want your, we don't want you like all healthy over here. No, we want to be, in this together where we're all not having time and feeling busy and all the things. Anyhow, I'll pause for a second because I could obviously keep going on this one for a while.
But it's so true. And I mean, I know, Carol, you were nodding. I mean, it's, yes.
Yeah. And like it, for me, and it's a little self kind of counterintuitive, but the reason I spend time on self-care, self-love is because I want to break that cycle.
Yeah.
That like, especially in front of my children, I'm like, I don't want them and my daughter growing up thinking this is the way it's done, or you're out of the club, like Karen was saying.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's still motivated by an external, by my children in a funny way, but it's like, I'm like, how do I break that cycle and give myself the okay to do the things that I need to do and I want to do? And usually I'm the only one between me and doing that, like I'm the barrier of allowing myself do that. So once we take that away, there's always 5 minutes that I can sneak in here and there to do what.
It's funny. About, oh gosh, I don't know, 3 weeks ago now, my girlfriends and I, there were 4 of us. We've all known each other for decades and decades, right? We all had big birthdays this year, and we said we're setting aside a weekend and we're going to go away, and we're going away for 2 nights, which really is unheard of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was wonderful about it. He's like, go, we're good, I've got this. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to make some dinners anyway and put them away and like, make sure that the in-laws are coming to make sure we're okay. And anyway, that weekend was over, and I was like, I mean, it was such a breath of fresh air, and you could think differently and interact with adults differently and rest and, have a couple of cocktails and good food and just like really good adult conversation. And it was such a good example of self-care in so many ways, because I was like, gosh, I don't know if I have time for this. And like, there's a lot to get out the door. It was so fulfilling in a different way. And I came home and I was like, okay, we can do this again. I mean, it's just amazing what little things can fill you back up again. And granted, that's a big thing. It's a weekend away, right? But it was a big thing. And it was so good for the soul.
And they were all in one piece when you came back.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what you have to trust, is that like everybody else knows how to do things too.
Yeah, I think that's actually such a good example of what self-care can be. Is actually, because for me, if I think about what self-care is for me, like what it looks like in my own life, is it's heavily based in relationship and community. It's not necessarily about, yes, massages for me are on my list of things that actually do help me because I have a lot of like tightness in my back. Someone's stressed out over here. And so that helps me, right? Because if my back's constantly aching, certainly that it's limiting to, my overall well-being. So, but I love the pointing out the community and connection and relationship can be such a source of filling our own tank. Yes. I'll also use the words, one of the things that we often, so I do corporate coaching as well, inside of organizations, and we look at we use the language of being well sourced. And when we look at being well sourced, it's like you said, you're filling all your tanks. And I don't know how many tanks we might have, but let's just consider there's many different tanks that contribute to this. And I really look at self-care through the lens of body, mind, and soul. So yes, it's our physical body, but I think for me, if I had to choose one, I would choose, it's hard between soul and mind, but I would choose either one of those over body, because for me, it has so much more of a lasting effect. I mean, if I'm caring for my spirit and my overall like inner being, then I'm able to show up a lot differently. So being well sourced, I think, is another way to kind of consider what self-care is.
Yeah. I think it's such a good point, because if you can work on where there's a deficit there in one way or another, I mean, you're going to, the obvious things come to mind, right? You need sleep, you need to eat, you need to be able to do those things, but like, there's so much more to it than that. And how do we make those things happen? Like, I always joke to my husband, I'm like, wow, I got to wash my hair today. Hair, that's just like that's just a necessity.
It's called personal hygiene.
Yeah.
It's so important, but like, there's just the little things sometimes that just fill up your cup in a different way, because you're like, okay, that's done. I can feel good about making sure that things are in order. You can look at it from so many different ways too, but I think that being able to check on yourself on the inside, though, is what is so important, especially for the moms in our community. And they've said that, they made that clear, Carol. And I know when we had our community together in July, that came up over and over and over again, that like having everyone in the community together to share stories, to lean on each other, it was good for them on the inside, and it wasn't a physical fix. It was an actual inner fix.
Yeah, I think that community aspect that Kara just talked about is like, we hear that over and over, and that's why we have like every chance, like whether we meet virtually or in person, you can see that we're filling many of these buckets just by being around others that we enjoy their company and they get us, and be able to talk about things together. And that's why we wanted to do this theme too, because that was one of the topics that kept coming up over and over. And it's like, okay, how do we attack it? What tools do we give our community so it's not this big overwhelming thing, but actual like small practical changes that they can fit into their daily busy life?
Yeah, I think this community aspect, I mean, I was a fan, right, when I started my podcast, but as I've continued to study and grow, and I like to do a lot of reading, so over and over again, it's coming up in different areas, like all different topics of the importance of community. And the one that stands out to me most is actually community and grief. We all know that as parents of children that have really complex stories, there's a lot of grief involved. And it's this kind of grief that's an evolving grief. And that we actually are designed to grieve as a community, not as individuals. And I think that is something very distinctly different than you see in society about grief. I don't think there's if I had to picture somebody grieving, I would have pictured someone in solitude. I would never, prior to kind of really diving into this, have pictured someone in a community. And we actually cannot grieve alone. And so, while I don't think most of us would actually associate grief to self-care, I 100% associate grief and essentially tending to your spirit as part of a huge part of our self-care.
Yeah, that just gives me goosebumps just thinking of that, just picturing our community and like connecting their souls and their feeling and their day-to-day grief. I mean, that's powerful. Love that.
Yeah.
And I think the last time that we talked to you, Kara, you had mentioned also the idea that grieving the life that you had planned for your child, and in doing so, being able to let a piece of that go to kind of lighten the load a little bit too. That acknowledging it, seeing it, facing it, and then being able to use that in your daily life too. I just thought that was so important. And I don't know if everybody has heard what you had to say, but I think it's something just to touch on, because it's a pretty powerful thing to acknowledge that you wished something different, but here we are, or may have wished, I guess.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of wishes I have that I did not get and will not get. And so that's when I point to evolving grief, is like, especially as, so my oldest son is now getting his license and kind of going into that milestone. And already when I was there in the DMV with him, I was like, wow, I don't think Levi's going to get to do this. And that's hard. It's hard to kind of like even think about that stage and it not happening. Um, in terms of grief, though, yes, I think acceptance is such a huge part of that. Acceptance is such a huge part of so many pieces of being a special needs mom. And once we accept something, and accepting something is just acknowledging what is without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we get stuck in acceptance because we confuse it with approval, which is saying something's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will never say my son's tumor is okay. Like, that was awful. I would never wish that on anybody. It's absolutely not okay with me. But my son has a brain tumor. Well, has, and we're working on that. And so when I just accept it for what it is, it allows me to move on. It's kind of like, I don't know, the picture that's coming to my mind is like, let's say your car breaks down. If you're not willing to say, oh, my car's broken, it's not working, like, you can't move on and go like find a mechanic or buy a new car, whatever the thing you would do. But the acceptance is actually the thing that allows us to move forward, and not kind of waste our energy trying to resist what is, which is oftentimes what we do when we're stuck not being able to grieve something.
Yeah, it's yes, exactly. What are some, I guess, for our community as we look at it, and for really anyone out there that's listening to this, I think the idea of self-care and or tending to your soul or releasing your grief or any of these things, to say them is one thing, to do them is a different story. And so what are some, how do you actively pursue this in your daily life without feeling like I don't even know if I have time for this? Like, how do I make this tangible?
Yeah, great question. Well, I think the first thing is actually shifting the relationship. As I mentioned earlier, it's really about a relationship. And a lot of us, when we think of self-care, we think of adding more to the list that we already have. And that's why we're like, no, no, thank you. My list is already very long, and it's not, I'm not going to add anything more to it. So then that's where we just kind of shut out self-care. Because we're approaching it from that doing energy, like we have to do more. I want to consider that actually self-care is like not doing. It actually might be not doing something that would be self-care, but it's really more of a being. And what I mean by that is like actually how you are being about something will determine how you show up. And it's the relationship you're having with yourself. That's how you're being with something or somebody. And so when we focus on this being, then we can ask better questions, like specifically ask, like, what do we need?
Mm-hmm.
And that actually, it's a very simple question. It's a simple phrase. But most of us, when we ask ourselves that question, we'll find we actually have a really hard time answering it. Like, we a lot of times are like, I don't know what I need. And then when we don't know, then that sets us up into a whole other spin. And so it's really asking ourselves better questions. I think when we also recognize it's not necessarily a time thing, that's really helpful. Another place I think I want to mention where we often get stuck is because I actually have this really vivid picture of myself over this last year. It was when my son was going into radiation. It was the first week of radiation, and ultimately I was under supported. I thought I was well supported, and I was not. So I was talking to a friend and colleague, and I was a mess. I was just not doing very well, and ultimately he helped me really realize that I wasn't caring for myself. Like, I really had stopped. And the reason I stopped is because I had been looking through this lens of it was either me or my kids that was going to get what they needed. And it was absolutely like what came up earlier. Carol, you mentioned it's like, well, my kids are a big motivation. Yeah, they are a huge motivation for us, right? And so when us mama bears get in this context of it's either them or me, usually most of us choose them over ourselves. And so the opportunity here is to really shift that that paradigm from either them or us to really looking at how can we both get what we need. And sometimes that might mean saying no to your child's therapy or whatever is on the plate. it doesn't always look the same way. It really requires you to be flexible and aware what's going on for you in the moment. So I don't even remember what your question was, but maybe that answered it. Did it answer your question?
Because it's sort of like practicality here, right? Like, how do you not get overwhelmed by the concept of self-care
Well,
and what you do? So how do you put that in action?
yeah. Well, actually, one of the things that I do for self-care is not ask myself to do too much.
Yeah.
It's mean. The things that we do to ourselves as moms is just cruel, man. Like there's so many moms that are like, "Oh my gosh, my to-do list is so long," and you look at the to-do list, it's like a month's worth of work. And I'm like, that's mean. Why would you ask yourself to do that all in one day when you know it's not possible? Like that's just like that's not cool. You wouldn't do that to anybody else. And so I have over the years really gotten very clear about the way I plan my days, my weeks, my months, etc. And I get really, really specific about when I'm doing things. At the beginning of every quarter, I create what I call an ideal schedule. And it's where I kind of pencil out, okay, here's when I'm taking my kids to school. Like that's non-negotiable. I'm doing that. Or I might realize, oh, actually, I can't do that and I need to hire help or find some other option. But in this case, I'm doing that. And there's all these other kind of non-negotiables. And then I start plugging in, okay, where am I going to fit in? Like for me, fitting in, I only exercise twice a week because that's what works for me in a way that like doesn't feel stressful. So I exercise twice a week. And I'm generally active, but you know, like my real exercise is limited to that. But I really stick to that. So I plug all the things in the way that they work. So I plug in when I'm going to therapy. I plug in all the different things so that I actually have a life that on paper works. Mm-hmm. Now, we all know it doesn't happen like that every week. It moves all around, but the idea is I have a framework that I'm using to kind of plan each and every week as it comes. So that's one way that I actually fit in some of those doing things because there are doing things. And then other than that, I also think for me, having a high level of accountability for things that I don't desire, but I know are sourcing for me, such as exercise. So for me, I go to a gym where you have to sign up ahead of time. And if you don't go, you have to like pay something. I don't even know what it is. I've never found out because I'm like, oh, if I have to pay for it, like I'm not doing it in the sense of like, I'll show up. So that works for me because I have a high level of resistance of not wanting to do that, which I think a lot of people would relate to, right? Yeah. Or even things like therapy. Like I have to make an appointment when I have my last therapy session for the future one. Otherwise, I will just never feel like doing it. Mm-hmm. Same thing for coaching. Like I have structures in place for me to show up certain times and places to do the work of what it looks like to care for myself. And so that is really, really helpful. Yeah, I think, I mean, there's so many, because again, remember, if self-care is not always doing, it doesn't necessarily have to be fit into our schedule. Something that you can consider is, I mean, I know you guys are both podcast listeners, right? So it's like when you're doing something around the house, whether it's, you know, driving or whether it's dishes, of listening to something that is filling for you. So that might be a podcast, it might be a book, it might be music, or it might be putting earplugs in and listening to nothing at all. Mm-hmm. Everyone actually, you know, has very different preferences and you have different needs at different times. Yeah. So that's something that you can be doing to kind of source yourself that doesn't take any time. I mean, it takes like 30 seconds to like pull up the thing. So yeah, I think that really when we look at how we're being with ourselves as the thing we're actually going for, we can recognize that it doesn't necessarily take a lot of time.
Mm-mm. Yeah, it's a really good point. That just little things, and even the organization ideas of it. I try so hard to stick to a schedule, but you know, it's like that you have to put in the non-negotiables or you're in trouble. Those always happen. It's the rest of the stuff that I'm like, all right, when's this going to fit in? It may be 11 at night, but it'll happen, you know, and I think we all struggle with that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think it's really, sorry, Carol, it's really exposing when I look at my schedule and I'm, I was going to say flawless. That's not the right word. I'm really reliable to show up for appointments and show up on time. And if it's an appointment with myself to do something for myself in terms of like that I'm taking on to source myself, not super reliable. Right. I mean, maybe I'm better than I once was, but it's not the same degree that I would have on showing up for somebody else. which is something I would just say is something to get curious about. So rather than judging ourselves, it's like, oh man, I'm flaking out or I'm not doing well enough, just be like, huh, I wonder why I don't show up for myself, and really answer the question. Answer the question of like, why is it that you don't show up for yourself? And there's gold there in terms of really answering the question and questioning it, and then choosing from a higher commitment of actually showing up for yourself. So sorry, Carol, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, no worries. I was just gonna kind of share, like, for the last couple of years, I've had to put a lot of active work to get me to like what you're talking about, Kara. You know, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like I had to stop and like problem solve one thing at a time. You know, therapy helped, just talking about what is it? Like, why do I do or not do whatever it is? And like, what processes am I putting in place today so I can do what I want to do in the future? Or who is helping me do what is it that I absolutely have to be me doing it, and what are things that I can ask, you know, my support system to do. So like when January hit and everyone is like, what's your resolution? I'm like, it's a non-resolution year. I'm gonna just
Mm.
do what I can, do what I don't get to, and kind of
Right.
just be, you know, just like, here's 10 more things I need to accomplish this year. I'm like, no, like, this is how I'm self-caring, by just allowing myself to not have new resolutions and to continue to do my best and to stop and problem solve when I need to, and just be, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, I mean, that's the problem, is that like anything for yourself seems to be the first thing that we can just sort of like
Yeah.
flip somewhere else, you know. But then it snowballs. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing, is that like setting the priorities, but not necessarily things that are like a resolution is, to me, is always like, now I gotta do that because I signed myself up for that, you know, or you know, it becomes like a mental burden almost sometimes, because you're feeling like, okay, well, I'm not meeting the mark of whatever that is that I've set for myself, which seems silly and like overwrought.
Yeah, right. You point at like, it's like what you're pointing out is like this, like it's like we're trying to do something to care for ourselves, but then if we're like judging ourselves and kind of beating ourselves up for not doing it well enough, like
Right.
kind of not helpful, counterproductive, if you will. And that's why, I share that like I exercise twice a week. Like probably, they say you're supposed to exercise 3 or 4 times a week. And I'm like, you know what? Like I have chosen to be very satisfied with like that is enough. It is enough for me. It's what works. And that's all that matters is it works.
So we've talked about, boundaries of sorts, the importance of figuring out what self-care looks like for you, and how to make that happen. Um, what are some takeaways for those who are listening and thinking, okay, like, now what? What do I do? How do I get started in this? What are the first maybe 3 things that someone should do right now if they're feeling like, okay, I need to start my self-care journey?
That's a good question. Um, well, it always starts with curiosity. So I would say, just really be curious and ask yourself the question, what do I need right now?
Mhm.
What do you need? And I would choose one area and really just focus on one area. And so perhaps it would be maybe likely that overwhelm would come up as the area that just feels like it's the area that's taking away the most in terms of well-being and feeling like you can show up for the life that you want to. And so maybe it's just really looking at overwhelm, what's causing it, really working on setting yourself up. Like we're talking about structures. Like when we look at overwhelm, there's so much I could say about overwhelm. That might be another episode in the future, but
Okay.
but it's like, okay, let's just focus on that. And let's focus on whatever the things that you will take on in terms of actions. Just focus on being 1% better every day. Like we don't have to go. I think, we do this as well. It's like all or nothing. And so we think, oh, I'm going to work on this overwhelm. And then, the next day you're overwhelmed again. And you're likely going to quit because you're like, oh man, I tried that yesterday. I tried to not be overwhelmed or whatever you did try, and it didn't work. So never mind, it doesn't work. I noticed that we expect like immediate results when we take on stuff for self-care or in service of self-care. When we don't get an immediate impact and relief, we quit. I mean, this is why I think wine is so joked about in terms of like, oh, my self-care is a glass of wine at night. And I'm not saying that that's not sometimes nice, right? But it's not self-care. It's self-comfort.
Mhm.
And that's immediate, right? Like you get to have that glass of wine or Netflix binge or whatever, and that's an immediate thing. And so we're used to that kind of stuff. And I would say we're really playing the long game with the self-care kind of stuff. So back to kind of where I would start with really asking yourself, what do I need? Like what's the area in my life that just feels like it's the biggest obstacle right
Mhm.
now? And answering for yourself the question. Nobody else can answer that question for you. Only you can answer the question of what I need. And you might be guessing. That's the other thing I want to put in here. When I go out and try different things for self-care, I don't always know if they're going to work. I just recently started playing tennis, well, a couple months ago. And I mean, I could have guessed this was going to be effective, but I'd always wanted to do this. And for me, I'm like, it's just an area. Play is something I struggle with in terms of like having just fun, just because. I know it's like, I think a lot of people relate to this though. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, it shouldn't be this hard to play, but it is. And so I schedule that in. Like, Friday afternoons, um, with few exceptions, I'm playing tennis. And it goes against all the common sense in my head because I mean, I have the to-do list just like everybody else. And, I do put other things off. Like, I haven't called the regional center because I'm going to be playing tennis instead. Where was it going with this? Um, Remind me. Lost my
Being,
train of thought.
being able to like the steps forward, you have to do things.
Oh, yeah. You don't know necessarily if it's going to work or not. Thank
Right.
you. And so it's like I try a lot of things. Some things make a difference, some things don't. I mean, I could give some serious entertainment to our listeners here on all the things that I've tried. That would be fun. We could do like outtakes.
Right. Try
And
this. That didn't work. Try this one.
yeah,
Maybe tennis will be the one that sticks, you know?
I mean, seriously, I really do think it would be very entertaining for people to see and witness all the things I do. One of the things I do for self care, this is just a funny one I'm going to put in there. It's this exercise called shaking and dancing. And literally, you shake your body like as much as this body can shake, take some breaths, and then you do a dancing exercise.
Yeah.
And you might be like, wow, I did not know Kara was this like out there. And I am, because this is a practice that allows my nervous system to calm down. This is also the thing. I feel like self care for moms and for most people is about calming this nervous system of ours down. Like, we are so hyper aroused these days as moms. There's so much coming at us. And so learning how to de-escalate ourselves and to like ground ourselves again. Oh, wow. That is like so important. So I've given probably not a lot more than like 1 or 2 or 3 steps, but hopefully that's helpful.
Oh, but it's again, it's practical ideas. It's not overwhelming. Like if you want to shake
Mhm.
and dance, then maybe that's your thing. If you want to go and
Yeah. I was like, for anyone who wants I'll give you more details. I'll give you all the secrets on my shaking and dancing.
love that.
And
Like start where you are and figure out what might be interesting to you or might sound like fun, and go do it. Go give it a whirl. Give it see what fits. I mean, because otherwise life's too short. We
yeah.
got to enjoy it too. It can't be too bogged down in what we have to do,
Yeah, I actually that's a really good point, because I think we can have this lens of like, oh, now I got to do self-care, but just like the lightness that you describe and like it could be fun. Like
Yeah.
you can want to do it. Like shifting, actually, that would be a good place to start too, right? Like, what do I want to do right now? That's
What
a
is,
great place to start.
yeah.
Good
What
one.
sounds like
Yeah.
fun? Is there something
Yes.
that sounds like fun? It would bring you joy. Then
Nice.
there we go. Like
Yeah.
find the joy in your life today.
Good.
I think we could probably talk about this for about 17 hours. You know,
Agreed.
I mean, there's so many ways to shake it all out, but I think that this, in a lot of ways, is a really good start. Simple ways to get started with self-care, simple ways to help yourself, and I'm hoping that in the future we can come up with other practical tips for our families on a variety of topics. I mean, we've touched so much today: overwhelm, grief, in meeting grief head on, something that our community is always dealing with. There's Carol, my head's spinning, but I think that there's so many things that we can talk about moving forward, in addition to just at the root of it taking care of ourselves.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
Well said.
just giving our families things to think about, just sit back and reflect and see what is it that you need right now, like Kara said, and start there. I think that's my takeaway, at least.
Yeah. Start where you are.
I'm having this vision of your community. I imagine there's a discussion forum where you guys can all talk, of actually having conversations about, hey, what are you taking on in service of self-care? And actually having this be something that the community as a whole integrates into the conversations, because I'm sure you're talking about all the things with all the doctors and all the things there. Like, that's of course part of the community. But what if your community really brought this into the forefront of the discussion and celebrated wins with each other, and really like cheered each other on in the area of actually taking this on, so that when you guys all gather next year, some of you can walk up to the group and say, yeah, I'm well sourced. I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
And not to say there won't be these bad times too, but like, I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
How cool would that be?
And then we don't kick them out of our group because they're well sourced.
We don't kick them out, but they're invited.
They can stay. Yeah.
Let's let everybody be well sourced. It'd be perfect. Oh,
Yes.
Kara, I love it. You are so wonderful, and such, I mean, just everything you say is so valuable for so many people, not only those in our community, but those in out in the world. So thank you for spending some time with us today. I know that we were really looking forward to it, and it was wonderful. So I hope we can do more in the future. Please, please.
Yes, I'd love to. Thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure.
Of course. Carol, thank you as always, our all things Jordan's guardian angels and rare disease guru, whose plate is probably most full in the whole world. I mean, thank you for taking some time out of your schedule too, because I know that there's so much going on. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina.
All right, you guys. Thank you. Again, we're going to put up some resources in the notes section of the podcast so you can take a peek at that, and check out Kara's website as well. And if you haven't heard our other podcast with Kara, please check that out. It's on Apple, Google, Spotify, on our website, jordansguardianangels.org. It's on YouTube for translation services for our families around the world. And all of our other podcasts are up there too. So look forward to having you guys hear those. And Kara, we really look forward to seeing you again. So thank you. Thank you for spending some time with us today. And we'll see everybody again really soon.